Welcome to Speaking in Spoons with your host, Christina Brookman.
Hi, welcome to Speaking in Spoons, a chronically ill podcast. I am your host, Christina Brookman, and with me we have the panel of Spoonies, Rachel Lattimore and Joe Albert. And we are doing a follow-up discussion on long COVID, POTS, chronic illness, and Mary Ladd's interview discussing her book, The Long COVID Reader. Okay, guys. So, um, something that really hit me about a lot of what she was talking about was the change in contributing to society. Um, and how in America we are measured by how much we produce and how much we work. And I'd love to know your thoughts on that because that really struck home with me.
Yes, me too. I mean, my business was named Latrimore Productions. And when it was at its height, I was overworking to the max.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean that really struck a chord with me. It's like we no longer have value to society.
yeah. And I have dysautonomia. The two of you don't, but I think there's such universality in a lot of what she was talking about. And I'd love to know if you have any thoughts on that, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the one thing is and I we touched on this in past episode, is the change in um accepting of changes pretty
Mm,
quickly. And the similarities in um different conditions. They can be one is, I think socially known to be, people kind of immediately when they hear cancer, it's
yeah,
a very scary word. COVID was equally a scary word, but long COVID, I think for a lot of people didn't really understand. And to see and hear um, that there are a lot of similarities to, going through chemo with cancer or
mm,
and these other conditions, I think, is something we were talking about earlier,
yeah,
that there's a lot of crossover.
yeah.
Um,
We
so
may
I,
have
I think,
different
yeah,
conditions, but we also have shared experiences that that make us a community.
yeah.
And I know I mentioned this earlier, and I'm supposed to be looking at the mic, but I have to look you in the eyes. It's
Well,
throwing me.
I'm looking at the down here, so I have no idea if it's
You have
it's
no.
on. I
We'll
have no
find
idea. I
later
don't
when
know
I
where I'm
try to
looking.
edit my
It's
hands that are like,
it's like we're in
but
the beyond somewhere talking. I don't know.
um oh, and it's interesting that you brought up the breast cancer um that she experienced her experience with breast cancer. And what I thought was really interesting was how she talked about the similarities, but then she also talked about the differences that with her experience of breast cancer, at least, um, it was very expected what would happen. Like she got the diagnosis, she'd go through the treatments, and then it would either go away or it would like you kind of knew what to expect. And then she's like now cancer free. Like she still has to get scans and all of that. And that's not to diminish cancer at all. Um, but that she has had a difficulty and struggles with the constant fluctuations of long COVID and not knowing what to expect.
Well,
Um,
I mean, I think it is very similar in a way of once you got a certain condition and you're now considered cured, right? You're still
right,
having to do checkups. You're still having to do, you still have to watch and make sure you don't get this condition again.
right,
Um, or, or you need to figure out what the origin of it was or
right.
other stuff. So, I think it is very similar, to build off what you're saying, um, to the 5 year, 6 year, 10-year scans that
Yeah,
cancer patients have to do, to the sense of people with long COVID, they're going to these scans, they're going to these doctor's appointments, they're in many cases having to deal with situations that where they're having to put their all out there, and maybe the doctor or the healthcare facility isn't really treating them as respectfully or listening to them as they should. And
there are very
so
few
yeah,
places in the country that
yeah,
have real adequate knowledge and education on not just diagnosis of long COVID and POTS and other forms of dysautonomia, but treatment.
right.
So
And I apologize
yeah,
if I was going on there. My point was just simply,
no,
I
that's
think they're
okay.
very similar in that it is a very long
A
process, no
long
pun intended,
process. Yeah,
of
yeah.
being watchful, and it can be exhausting to the individual.
No, I think that's a great point. Thank you. What were you gonna say, Rachel?
Oh, I was going to say that I think also right now we're just in the beginning stages of research for long COVID
Mm-hmm.
in America. And that's not the same case for cancer and other chronic conditions.
Correct.
And
Well,
so, you know, it's in a lot of ways, everyone that's going through it right now is on the forefront of,
medicine.
yeah.
However, I will throw in there that we have known about POTS and orthostatic hypotension and other areas of dysautonomia, which long COVID falls into. And a lot of the testing is exactly the same.
So
Um,
before
yeah,
before you go on, I was actually gonna it would be beneficial for me and I think anyone listening if you could define dysautonomia and a couple of things just so everyone is
yeah,
on the same
yeah.
page.
So, and we're gonna get into it more when we have Dr. Jeffrey Boris come on. He's a cardiologist who specializes in dysautonomia, and he's got some new research that he's done that was recently published, and he'll be on to discuss that in our next episode. But the way I like to describe dysautonomia is basically your autonomic system is on crack, just to put it plain and simple. So it's a breakdown in the connection of um, the autonomic system. So like things that your body naturally does, blink, pee, um, you digest your food. All of those basic things, there's a disruption kind of between your brain and your body, and also like blood flow, like your veins pumping, things like that. So like with me, I fall into that because I have POTS, and that's postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And thank you, Rachel. I've been living with these for like 12 years, or actually since I was a teenager, because I was diagnosed with orthostatic hypotension when I was in middle school, because I started passing out and my blood pressure would drop to like 50 over 40,
Wow.
and everything would turn white. And I'd get real cold and my lips would turn blue, like around my lips, and I would just, you know, gone. That doesn't happen anymore. It's evolved. but like people would always comment, like not know what my eye colors are. They're blue, but my pupils are huge. And that's because my brain isn't connecting to go, hey, you need to shut the pupils now.
Mm.
So the doctors usually don't have to dilate me. And the blood pressure for me in POTS, like the typical version is when you change positions, your blood pressure drops and your heart rate raises. But you can have different types of POTS where your blood pressure goes up and your heart rate raises. Like there's all kinds of, and also just to show, like while mine is normally low and then high, low BP, high heart rate, the uh when it's really wackadoo, it's all over the charts. And that just means my system isn't working properly. And the biggest medication or treatment is strength training, aqua therapy. There's certain medications that they have, but everybody reacts differently. Even ADHD medicine can be a medicine because it helps with the constriction of the veins too. Yeah, Rachel.
Can I just say, I love how the biggest assumption is that everyone that is disabled is either has opulent wealth or has someone to take care of them that is of opulent wealth,
Yeah.
because every medication, treatment, therapy, whatever, it ain't
Massage.
it ain't cheap.
Now, I am lucky that I am now on disability because being on disability, my medication for me is free because I also have Medicaid, but I'm on disability. And it took 2 years, 2.5 years to get disability. That was before COVID. During COVID, they lost a lot of workers. Um, so, they're even more backlogged. And I was able to successfully get disability after like in my first appeal process. But I was blessed to have the help of Elizabeth Horn, who's an incredible disability advocate. Um, but long COVID is very similar to POTS. You'll have issues sometimes with the blood pressure and heart rate. It can affect your organs. That's where there's like a little bit of difference. But you have that like incredible fatigue. That's a big part of it. You have same with POTS, like huge fatigue. Like I like to describe it like an elephant. It's sitting on top of me, and like I've probably said this 100 times, but for those in our generation of the never-ending story, when he's trying to get his horse and he's through the sludge. Taru, is it a Taru? But anyways, it's trying to get through that sludge and literally just um, waking up and trying to sit up, just going to the room is a feat of energy. Um, so sometimes you're like, well, today my bed is my bathroom because that's literally, if you don't have assistance, that's all you can do. And that has happened to me before. Not to be gross. That's one of the things I loved about Mary was her honesty, her vulnerability to talk about the crapping and talk about, her long COVID vagina and all of the stuff that people don't talk about because that, like, those things dramatically affect your life. Like, I'm experiencing this while dating. So, like, one of my ex-boyfriends, I literally,
Hey, some guys like that.
well, it
I'm
kind of
not,
fits,
I'm
but
not judging.
I pooped on his bed because I couldn't, and he very kindly cleaned me, bathed me, cleaned it up. Now I'm kind of glad, but, um, but that's humiliating. of eat in restaurants. I mean, and then with long COVID, like you're worried about organ damage and things going forward, which I know you understand, Rachel. And like I was saying to Mary, is while research is new for long COVID, POTS there has been awareness of for decades. And we have been fighting to get government and medical uh education awareness just
Assistance.
being legitimate, because it's that, oh, it's in your head. Oh, but you don't look sick. Why are you using a handicaps, thing? Like, because, and even with the medical professionals, like where I live now, there's people are very, if you have the diagnosis of POTS, they're like, I can't touch you. Um, and it um, makes me sad, but I'm glad that now there is this research that's happening for long COVID, this awareness that's happening for long COVID, advocacy of people like Mary Ladd getting experiences and stories and the word out there. All
Yes.
of that does is helps the entire dysautonomia community. And that is a beautiful thing. Yeah. Sorry,
You
that was
mentioned, no,
my
no,
monologue,
you
but
mentioned about, the medical research, especially just starting out with long COVID, Rachel. Um, One of my concerns, and you just do simple searches. Pew Research just did just came out with a study last year showing that Americans have less trust to some degree. I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but basically, in scientist.
mm,
So I wonder, and as we kind of see throughout the country, kind of these changing vibes towards science, towards knowledge, I wonder, could that affect, or is there a concern? Do you guys have any concern as members of the disability community if science could be under threat in the near future? With some of the policies that we're seeing put in place, with some of um, you know, the things that have been discussed. I'm not trying to get into that area,
no,
if
I
you get
think
what I'm
that's an
saying, but I
incredible
am.
yeah,
But
I,
yeah,
with
yeah,
the when we talk about cancer research, when we talk about COVID, especially this vaccine, I mean, this used technology, mRNA, I mean, stuff that could be prohibited in the future, I believe, because uh I don't know. I mean, I believe that has connection with stem cells and that, and that can all go. Yeah, anyway, go ahead.
I
Don't
yeah.
quote me on the stem cell thing, people. I don't.
right. I was just gonna say that I'm not gonna name
Yeah.
candidates or anything, but there was a person with I'm not sure what their disability was, but they were asking a question from the candidate about, basically what they would do, if they were president for those people with disabilities and the LGBTQ plus community and just basically the communities that have gone under assisted. And I don't know, I just thought that was so beautiful because this isn't just, I don't know, this is a time where all aspects of our lives could go one direction or the other.
Yeah.
But
Like the assistance that means I have a home and medication
yeah,
can change so yeah. I think that's great what you said. A great topic that you brought up,
yeah,
Joe, because um because funding gets federal funding and things like that that go um to the scientific research for medication, not just federal, but and if they
Well,
lose that, if they lose those grants, that's huge. Um
well,
uh
and I think it just goes into and I'm just, very curious and you're very right, things can go either way, but I think that's very true in life too for an individual, a person with a
Very true.
disability. So I'm just curious if that ever creeps into your mind. It does for myself. You know, uh, as I definitely have for myself seen, especially among the younger generation, a worrisome distrust of,
Of
and
science.
to me that I worry if that will push, um, if that could push some against some policies in the future that could further our investment and
I
things
mean,
into medical research.
I think it's good to have a healthy
Yeah.
mistrust, or like I think there's also like the generation where doctors, anything a doctor said,
Hmm.
you take it 100%. You know,
Right.
they're the doctors, they have the knowledge,
Right.
they have the background, so you do or whatever they say. Um, versus what you're talking about, Joe, where they're extremely skeptical, so they're not um trusting at all. And I think it's safer to be somewhere in the middle. I mean, doctors are not gods. There's no
Right.
way they could possibly know um everything about every single condition. Um and
Yeah, they're not
like they
perfect.
just they can't, and it's okay for
Yeah.
you to have your own research. It's okay for you to bring
Oh
that
no, and
in.
Well, I have someone in my family who quit somewhere down the road, quit trusting doctors, scientists, and only started trusting one politician. And they got COVID 3 or 4 times, now has long COVID, and has been sick since 2020. And
Mm.
they've been diagnosed with lupus and Rover's disease, liver disease, blood pressure is high. And I mean, just it's terrible. And I feel like the worst part is that they haven't connected the dots that,
Yeah.
they refused to get the vaccination because they were claiming, one person was smarter than all these doctors and chemists and scientists. And now their health is just in the gutter. And it's devastating. And it's like people need to know who to trust. And I think that's the biggest issue right now is the spread of misinformation and
Who to
knowing what is
trust.
true.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's I think that's extremely hard and a really good point. Um, because like going back to the point I was saying that, the doctors are not gods. Like, if you let one mistake that one doctor does, or even a couple of mistakes and bad experience, like there is legit medical PTSD, like trauma from medical experiences from your illnesses, but also experiences from work working with the medical community, particularly with disorders like these that are chronic. They may not be rare, but they're rarely diagnosed, misdiagnosed, misunderstood. So it's yeah, it's hard to know who to trust. But I think it goes back to like what sources are you using too? Like like I always try to look at doctors' resumes and see if they have experience in what might be going on with me or not. And like, what are you reading online? Like, I had a friend, I had a friend who was a professor, and I remember when he assigned the kids to read the play Oklahoma and go see it. Um, because the college was putting it on. And then the night before their tests or before their papers were due, he went to Wikipedia and changed the entire Wikipedia page and said that like Oklahoma was about the story of the Nazi invasion of Oklahoma. Um, and like so he could and Wikipedia is not like you can change stuff, but they do have people check it and all that stuff. But because he did it the night before, um, he did have one or two students that wrote in depth about the Nazi invasion of Oklahoma. Um, Reminds me of that 80s movie, but that was the Russians. But I guess my point is, um, like I like to use research articles and things like that. And it is very scary to your point, Joe, like what you were talking about, like what happens when we stop, when we're not trusting science, not trusting
Well,
it affects research, it affects our treatment, like you said, Rachel, it affects people's health.
yeah.
Um, so maybe find a way to have a healthy mistrust somewhere in the middle where it's not mistrust. Is there a better word for that, guys?
Well,
Do you
I
think?
would
Like,
say it's not only who to trust. I think it's holding, when we look back, holding these folks accountable.
yes,
And with the individual that Rachel's talking about, I think, these things are very scary situations. I mean, COVID
yeah,
was a majorly scary situation. And while doctors are not gods, they, in many cases, are in a position of God. Um, they have, in many cases, control over life and death in many of
that
those
is scary.
situations.
Yeah,
And that's why we have the pledge of Hippocratic Oath. And if you trust someone out there on TV, and then all of a sudden you get that condition, the next person connected to that person, is the doctor. I mean, that whole trust system all of a sudden is totally messed up, and everything else has been messed up out there.
yeah. It just,
And so, I mean, so that's where and the second point I just want to add here, people who are working class who have, who are working 40 hours a week, sometimes even more overtime, you know, or in certain types of insurance, they restrict those doctors you can see.
yeah.
So sometimes you only get, Doctor A or maybe Doctor B if you need an
And
afternoon
you can't
appointment.
leave state, and you can't.
Yeah.
And
And
I get that.
and
It's
so
my
yeah,
utopian
yeah,
society, Joe.
absolutely. And
And not
absolutely.
everybody reads like research articles or has time to do that.
No. And yeah. So I think that's where community comes in.
Yeah,
And that's what Mary was talking about in her thing, that if you become isolated, which COVID did, it just drove everyone,
isolated us.
right, regardless of your politics, both sides can agree, they became isolated. It allows that misinformation and
Yeah,
that distrust and that
to just
anger.
fester.
Right. And that's where we start having this kind of tyranny of merit, to take from a professor at Harvard, I think Sandel, he wrote a book about, but this element then of, well, these people, they're so smart, and yet they told me to do something and I tried it and then I got sick, or maybe I didn't do it and
Yeah.
I got sick. And well, those doctors, they're telling people to do that and they're still getting sick. So I don't know who to trust. And that's an element, that's not the basis of his argument, but I'm just stealing his name, the naming scheme, for my purpose.
Yeah. No, but I think that's good. And I like that you channeled us back to community and what Mary was talking about and how – like, I mean, during COVID, everybody, – 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 everybody,, 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 – I just want to throw this out there. Everybody started to experience what so many people experience on a daily basis, living with chronic illness and disability, isolation.
Yeah.
Like, and
Oh,
everybody was
true.
going, they're like, I want to get in my car. I want to do this. I want to do this. And I'm like, can you imagine if that's your experience every day?
I think that some people don't realize that there's a whole community of us that are still in COVID times
Yeah.
and that we are still immune suppressed.
Yeah.
And that people kept
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, you're better now, right?" And it's like, that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know. Yeah, like, and I love what she said. Like, do we have to wear a sign that says, like, I just don't feel good, okay? You
Because they
know?
don't know, like, um, uh, uh, like people that know me really well will look at me and go, "Oh, I know you're in pain." But if you don't
Yeah.
spend every day with someone, you don't always know their isms and their
Yeah.
tells. And with an invisible illness, that's the case. There's that masking that we do because we want to participate, and there's that forced or that societal image of like kind of taking it back to the contribution of to society. I love how she talked about lists, you know, and that
Hmm.
she needs to make lists, and it's hard because it's like, well, what if my list has nothing on it? Yes, because we're measured in what we produce. But like I I think it's about I think she's so well verbalized what so many of us feel in that grieving process. And then it's about, she talked about, she hates the word acceptance, but, it's about being in the present and accepting who you are in that moment. So maybe that list is different. Maybe today's list is I opened my eyes. I turned the TV on. So I used
Yeah.
one of my hands, like you just adjust that, but that's very hard and challenging. And it takes community and the support of your community to be able to successfully do that.
I think,
Well,
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. About community, I was just going to say that they're saying, psychiatrists are saying we're in a loneliness pandemic now.
Yeah.
And, I think everyone can agree that no matter who you voted for, your life, there was and she said this, there was like a before times, like you used to do this and I, I feel like me personally, I'm somewhere still like in that
And
dash,
that, yeah.
I'm in the dash somewhere. And it goes back to trust because through my journey, the people that I trusted the most are the ones that didn't come with me to the other side. And so it goes back to what Joseph was saying earlier. It's that like vicious circle of who do I trust now?
Yeah. Who's your community?
Yeah.
And if you're listening, if you're watching, we're your virtual community. Because I really have learned in this journey, like it may not be biological family, it may not be spouses or, you know, but it's the family you make, right? Along the way. And that's your community. And that can include family or spouses, but it isn't for everybody. It's yes, Joe.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I
Um,
just could see it itching.
yeah, yeah. No, I just wanted to say on the loneliness element, I always, and this is not, I always, it's kind of like the AI thing, and we say, AI is gonna take over the world and be really dangerous. I always joke in that case that's a bit of a marketing scheme on that phrasing. With this, I think it's a bit of an overstatement. I think there is a loneliness issue, of course, but I think what it is more of a services crisis. One that, people don't have access to mental health services and other things like that. But secondly, I think it's an element once again, and this is not to of our economic system, our marketing system, in which we are inundated by a world that is constantly raising the bar each year on how much we should be socializing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just get a new phone and you go on the app store, first thing is all these social apps you should have, all of these things you should be doing. Um, you know, One of the key things when you get a phone, it used to just be for, I mean, and both of you know this, back then it was just for calls and you had like the texting thing. The camera didn't really do much, but now camera's a
Yeah.
main feature for socializing, right?
Yeah.
Because so I think we also, and I think going back to being in the moment, there also has to be an acceptance of it's okay to be alone. It's okay to live without being engaged. I'm not trying to sound like I can do this. I can't. I need to have my phone with me, constantly.
It's an appendage on my hand.
It's yeah, I hold it like it's, part of my system. It's like my heart, heart, that. But I think that's a real thing because when people say there's a loneliness element, I think there's a element there of it takes two to
The tango.
fix that. And it bothers me because I think sometimes it makes the person feel like, well, I'm to blame for, especially if
Yes.
that person is doing what they can.
Yeah.
And, this is kind of, and once again, this could definitely be another topic, but it kind of goes into the fact that we have companies that, target us and get away with it, you
Yeah.
know, and,
But I think it also goes
yeah,
back to services, like you
mm,
said, in a different way.
mhm,
Like when you said services, I was thinking transit. I was
yep.
thinking,
Oh, absolutely.
the tech. No, no, don't be sorry. I just found it really
Let me
interesting.
be sorry. I have a quota. I have to say sorry
No,
several times a day.
but like, but I think people don't realize how lack of services like that. Sometimes chronically ill or disabled people are wanting to participate in
Yep.
society and can't because they don't have resources to help them do. And
Yep.
community is not coming in and going, hey, pick you up. Hey, I haven't heard from you in a while or seen you on Facebook in a while. Are you okay? Like check in with your people. And she mentioned that. Mary said, a great thing that COVID did was brought us really to recognize the power of the internet and connection with
Yes.
people that you could get virtually and to use those resources. Although I never thought of it, Joe, as a what did you say? Like as a not a burden, but a intimidation factor, I guess, or that you feel pressured when there's all these opportunities for socialization.
Oh,
Did I
yeah. I
mishear?
mean,
Yeah, yeah.
we're
But
inundated. It's just
yeah,
like with
for
women
me, like
with
I get
marketing.
excited, but it's also
With marketing, but what I'm
yeah,
saying is that it's you don't feel like you're doing enough. I mean, so
yeah.
it's I mean, you look at, I mean, and that's something with I think young men, I think that's really difficult for them is they feel like they're not dating enough or they're not, there's been, I mean, you see that with these apps, there's just
Oh, I think
constantly new
it's
dating
just as
apps.
applicable with women though. Like you
Absolutely.
haven't gotten
And
married yet, or you
yeah,
don't have kids, like
and we're
childless
seeing
cat
because of
lady.
the economic times, more individuals are living at home with their parents. This isn't just a
Yeah, yeah,
disability issue. And I think that's where the cultural rifts are coming into place.
yeah,
And you know, so that's why I say I think there's a lot of people feeling pressured. I mean, look, our music, society, our movies, they're constantly pressuring people, I think anyone to be like, oh, should I be living like that? Should I be on my own? Should I be, out and about and having all these friends? And it's like, no, if you have one or two friends and you're happy, be happy. You don't need
yeah.
to be,
Well, it's that middle.
yeah,
It's finding
yeah,
that happy middle
yeah.
of like, you know, don't be glued to your phone. Don't take your phone to the bathroom, um, and have it as an appendage. It's
Well, yeah,
draining. It's physically
one
draining.
comedian, I forgot who mentioned it, was like, was I forgot. I don't know if he was one of the problematic ones now, but he's like, that was mindfulness back then when you were in a
Yes,
car by yourself and you
mindfulness props. Yeah,
know,
Rachel.
yeah.
Well, for me, I used to be that way, which
Mhm.
brings me back to what I said earlier and what Mary said, that people were saying, you used to be this way, you used to do that, and how being chronically ill changes all of your routines.
Yeah,
And I would say that before the accident, when I was just chronically ill, my routine was my phone was an extra appendage. And now, since the accident, it's completely the opposite. I mean, the only time I'm able to, open my computer is really once a week to record this because since the accident, I've developed vestibular migraines and
mhm.
I have sensitivities to screens. So, but on the plus side, I've spent more time like outdoors and,
Yeah,
seeing things, but
Mhm.
not everybody has that luxury, which brings us back to, I mean, they must think, most of these communities, quote unquote communities, you have to pay for. And I think the most brilliant thing is that, she has so many resources that aren't like that. And
yeah.
it's really refreshing. She was really refreshing to me. And I love that she talked about laughter because
I
laughter,
love her sense of humor.
yeah, laughter's the best medicine.
Her long COVID vagina and like the honesty of the bathroom issues because there's so many people out there that understand that, not just people with long COVID, and there's things we don't like to talk about that are humiliating, but to hear other people openly talking about it I think makes you feel less bad about it with you. At least it did for me. It made me have a moment of, okay, someone else is going through this too, and we'll get out on the other end of it. And I love how she talked about, like she talked about the negative, but then she talked about, the irony of the things that and how it's changed her life, like the good things, like that she can now accept love accept help, you know?
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
really interesting, and I'd love to know you guys' thoughts on that. Is that um when I think our experiences are different, Rachel and I has been more progressive or like um but you have also had that, Joe. You deal with new health diagnoses, and stuff that come up. So, um, what do you think about that? Accepting love, accepting help.
Well, um, you know, I've I was going to make a Buddhist monk joke there, but I don't. I know that was a bad joke. I apologize. But my point was accepting love. I think for myself, I'm always going to have that element of Catholic guilt. So, that's always going to stick with me. But I think it's trying to stay in the moment. And
Mhm.
I try to, which always works, is what would I say to someone I care about who was going through the same thing?
Mm.
And try to flip it backwards. And that
And
seems
then
to
say it
help.
to yourself.
Yeah.
That's
It,
beautiful.
yeah. So, yeah, I can have some good ideas there.
Yeah,
They're
you do have good
they
ideas
may not
still.
be as poetic sounding, but they're, but
But I like
um,
that because you have
yeah,
to love and take and that's what Mary got it. She learned like that no one's gonna do it for you. So you have to be okay. Like
right.
going back to yeah.
Yeah. And I think just, you know, yeah, and I think in that case also, there's also an acceptance of, and this is going to sound weird because it's a little counter to the love element, but there's an acceptance of there's just a lot of things bigger than what I'm
Yeah.
going through, than what, and that in this connotation, I'm not special. I'm not impactful in this sense. I'm on this really big, large earth, and there's that's a tiny little speck. And so, you know, and that kind of helps me put things in perspective sometimes when I get really, so
Brings you out of the dark place.
yeah, I mean,
I mean,
yeah,
you kind of
yeah.
teeter there.
Oh, did I,
I'm
did I teeter
you,
right there?
you teeter right
Dark,
on the
I'm
edge.
sorry. Well, yeah, I
I'm
mean, I think,
teasing.
yeah, yeah. No, it's more of it helps you, I think, just put things sometimes in the sense of not to keep going on here, but I think because we're a very individualized society, I think
Yes.
sometimes we can sometimes keep focusing and
On
some
the
on
self.
ourselves, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's good just to remember, wait a minute, there's a whole massive
Hmm.
system out there, and I'm, you know, and so when I think of that, it's weird. My anxieties just quickly dissipate. So even just
I
for a
think
quick
that makes
second,
sense.
yeah.
Like the idea of the
So it's not
perspective, it makes it
darkness.
not
I'm
as
not going,
overwhelming.
I don't really have darkness. I'm not like, you know, uh, doing, evening walks,
No,
wondering
I
what
just
does it
meant
mean?
when you go
What's the
to
point of it
Nate
all?
and I we used to talk
Why,
about the dark place
who
because
created this
it's
whole thing? Yeah.
me and Nate, yeah. Because
Uh-huh.
it's the place that, when you're really down or depressed because of
Mhm.
all that you're going through with or overwhelmed, like just that overwhelming, like, but But yeah, I watched true crime and I was like, I was talking to my counselor and I was like really worried. And I was like, is something wrong with me? And she's like, first of all, statistically, women watch true crime, but it puts you in your logical mind and kind of takes you out of the emotional mind.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that kind of makes sense. And it also, for me, helps me realize, oh, there are other situations
I get what you mean
worse
now.
than mine.
Yeah. I
But
thought
like
you just
also, she
thought something
said,
was wrong with you because you were watching the show. I'm sorry.
no, I
I
do.
get
That's
it.
why I was like,
Yeah.
God, is something like,
Yeah.
but she said, no, it makes sense that you're
Mhm.
watching this to help you, kind of like what you're talking about, keep things in perspective.
Yeah.
Um, and then also she said a lot of men will watch war videos and things like that because they'll, think of the bigger picture, like you're
Mhm.
talking about, which I thought was it just interesting that
Yeah.
people have different ways of stepping out of self and think of community and like where they are in in the idea of the
Right.
whole scheme of things.
So does that
Um,
explain why all the grandfathers read World War II books? It's
Probably.
yeah.
Um, but I wanted to go back to her reading, her actual poetry that she read. My favorite line, actually. was when she's talking about seeing a new PCP and, like she said, when I finally feel seen and heard, but, then there's the caveat of, trying not to get too hopeful. But I still loved that when I finally feel seen and heard, for me, that had deep connection of that's all I ever really want is to feel seen and heard. Not just with my disability and illness, in life, but yeah, like, but especially with my, like, in this journey of, is to be, um, I have had struggles with people not thinking it's real. And the funny thing is, it's not even medical people. It's usually people
Exactly.
outside. The medical people know it's real, but that's, I mean, I have had ER visits where, but the ER is for trauma, it's not for diagnosis, and they are not in any way an expert of what's going on with me. But the doctors, they know I'm, but
Right.
having that validation and support is really important.
I
And
think
yeah,
that's there's a quote, I don't remember who by, but it's something along those lines like when I'm heard, I feel loved, and when I feel loved, I feel validated, and then I'm able to
yeah,
heal. But
yeah,
there's no healing until someone's listened to you and understands.
yeah.
And that goes for our friends, our doctors, our spouses, our community. I I love that this goes back to laughter. I love that she goes back to talking about how a lot of the stories, or some of them may be crude, but it's just good to laugh.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, laughter. We need more
Greatest
community.
medicine.
Yeah, and just being like, like that book, Everybody Poos, it's
Yeah,
like, let's be real. Like, everybody is going to get older. And, you know, let's talk about it.
To build
let's
off of
talk
that,
about it. Yeah,
um, I think, one thing is that Mary absolutely understands the power of words. And
yeah,
I think words are, and still are today in this country, the most powerful thing that individuals have to talk about their experience, to talk to whatever is out there. But the other thing is that it's the use of words and being blunt about the experience gets you kind of to perk up.
yeah,
I'm kind of listening to it, and then I hear this, and like my ears kind of perk up because like I did not expect that.
yeah,
And even if it offends, even if it causes one to shake their head and go, oh, I don't know about that. I wouldn't say it like that. It's still in their memory. It's still something that they've heard, and that's exactly, I think, in very keeping with our style of very American style of writing, which is it pushes the boundary.
yeah.
And so I think that's a very thing I appreciated about it.
I love
Um,
that.
secondly,
Powers
I
your
just want to,
words.
yeah,
Yeah,
secondly, I just want to say, as Josh isn't here, so as the only guy here right now, there's health conditions and symptoms that I can't relate to. And so there's a bit of an element you get of like, um, you know, socially, your first inclination is to go, oh, this is a private matter because this is,
mm,
a different gender. I need to leave the room.
right.
And, but then you start realizing, well, I need to understand what that experience is like for someone else. I need, different gender. I need to understand. And, so it may make you feel a little uncomfortable. It may make you feel so it was just interesting to kind of sit there and listen to that, where normally you'd be kind of like, oh, well, this wouldn't really apply to me because I'm a guy. So
Right.
um
But I
uh
love
I
that
I
because in
might
a way
not
it
be
does
have access
apply.
to that story
Yeah,
because normally that story wouldn't reach me probably
right.
initially. I wouldn't it wouldn't be advertised to me, or I wouldn't first,
You wouldn't necessarily pick it up.
right, because so I really appreciate being able to hear it.
Yeah, I love that you said that because I hadn't honestly thought about that. And I think what you're saying is spot on. Like if the genders had been reversed, like might I like, oh, I shouldn't bring this up or talk about this because,
Mm.
that's their private situation. But I love what you said and that it's important for you to understand. And that's part of the validation too that you're talking about, Rachel. And just kind of the power of your story, the power of someone's story and being heard. And I think, yeah, I really hope she will do a second one because I think this is so important. Getting people's stories out there. Obviously, I think it's important, but I think it's just amazing she's giving people an opportunity to share their creativity, to share their story, their voice, and package it all up. Uh,
I love
so
it.
yeah, for those of you listening, or watching, um, please check out our website. We'll have Mary's information, www.speakinginspoons.com. We also have information in our show notes as well. So you can access it there on how you can purchase your own copy of the Long COVID Reader Uno. Um, and save your spoons. Keep in touch because coming up on Speaking in Spoons, a chronically ill podcast, we have an interview with Dr. Jeffrey Boris to discuss his latest research on POTS on celebration of Dysautonomia Awareness Month. So stay tuned and save your spoons.
If you want to contact us, please send a DM or email to speakinginspoons@gmail.com with any stories you have or would like to interview with us on any of our upcoming topics. And check out our website for all of our upcoming episodes and what's happening in the Speaking in Spoons community at www.speakinginspoons.com. Thank you for listening to Speaking in Spoons, and have a great day.